Welcome to the Cold Case Christianity broadcast, the only Christian case-making program hosted by a cold case homicide detective. J. Warner Wallace has been investigating cold case murders in Los Angeles County for over a decade. His work has been featured on Fox News, Court TV, and Dateline. For more information about Jim's work and the case for Christianity, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. Now, here's your host, J. Warner Wallace.
Thanks for joining us at Cold Case Christianity. I am J. Warner Wallace. Today we're going to talk about something that is pretty common in terms of objections or concerns that even Christians have related to their belief in Christianity, related to their faith in Christ. And it's, when I give you the term, the hiddenness of God, you may not kind of sense right away what that even means, and lots of people don't. But if I pitched it this way, aren't there times, as a believer, when you wonder why it is God is not more obvious, why it is that He's not more present, why you can't hear His voice more clearly, why He's hidden at all? Aren't there times when you wonder why this is true in the nature of the entire world in which we live, where it seems as though God could step in more publicly to defend either His honor, to defend the truth of the Christian worldview, to defend those who are helpless? As a matter of fact, if you think about the hiddenness of God, is in many ways at the root of some of the classic objections related to the problem of evil. Why would an all-loving, all-powerful God allow bad things to happen in the world in which we live? Kind of connected to that is why wouldn't God step in and stop it? And if He did, of course, He wouldn't be so hidden. So really the idea, the hiddenness of God is really at the underbelly of a lot of the problem of evil. So I want to be able to address it, right? I mean, I've thought about it. You've probably thought about it. Have you ever heard an objection from a non-believer that sounds kind of like this? If there is a God, He would make Himself known. He would make Himself so well known that no one would be arguing about it. Sometimes the skeptic himself or herself might say something like, well, if there is a God, why doesn't He appear? Write His name on this mountain next to me, or write that He exists in the clouds so that I will recognize that He exists. Why is He so hidden? As a matter of fact, I've heard skeptics object and say, well, look, if there is no God, then I would expect to see Him about as much as I do now. So it makes more sense, my position, that there is no God based on how little I actually see Him. So doesn't the hiddenness of your divine imaginary deity work better in my atheistic worldview, they might say, where I reject Him? You know, of course, if He doesn't exist, that would explain why He's so hidden. The fact that you Christians even concern yourselves with the hiddenness of God just kind of demonstrates to us that, yeah, you're seeing what we're seeing. There is no God, we don't see Him, and you're wondering why you don't. Well, we don't wonder why we don't, because we don't think He exists. But I think you can see how the hiddenness of God is an objection that all of us either have wrestled with ourselves as believers, or have had to explain to those who have objected at some point. Now, I gotta say before I go any further, I sometimes wonder when I'm doing these shows if those of you who are listening are experiencing the same kinds of questions from your friends or skeptics in your lives. I remember one time someone said, you know, I don't actually have I don't get those kinds of questions from my friends. And then I gotta tell you, I kind of wonder, well, should we be the kinds of Christians who are hearing a lot of objections? In other words, are we putting ourselves in places where we would hear these kinds of objections, or have we become so insulated? I think you've noticed one thing is true, at least here in America, that it used to be we had a few sources for information we could go to. When I was a kid, you only had a few sources. Now, whether they were good or bad, or you know how they were the position politically, I don't even care. All I'm saying is, in those days, if you didn't get your news from the networks, you didn't get any news, or from the major papers. But now, there is every stripe and flavor of news website, online periodicals that you could access. And in fact, you could decide that, you know, I don't like the politics of this particular news outlet or newspaper, so therefore I will find the one that I agree with, and I'll just get all my news from that site. Well, this is true for everything, not just our news. It's true for every piece of media we consume. We can find ourselves just aligning our favorites, our tabs on our Internet Explorer or whatever you're using could just be your favorites that only reflect your worldview. And I get that. Sometimes people get aggravated when they encounter a different worldview, and they don't want to be aggravated all the time, so they only make sure they insulate themselves. And now, given the internet, we've got millions of choices, and you could certainly find those folks who agree with you and just stay there. Never cross over that line in the sand. Well, I hope that you are occasionally crossing over that line in the sand, and I hope that you've got enough diversity in your life that you find yourself. I don't know if I mentioned this on this show, but at the end of last year, I was asked to attend a summit, and that summit was involving a lot of political and influence leaders in Washington, D.C., speaking about law enforcement and public policy related to public safety and what reforms needed to be or didn't need to be, or just debating these issues back and forth. And when I got there, a room of only about 30 people from all over the political spectrum, I had the best time. I had the best time because I loved everyone I was sitting with. And I can tell you, I probably agreed with 3 of them. But we had a chance in that room to discover each other's humanity, to discover what it is we have in common. And I would love to go back and have dinner or spend a day with anyone in that room, even though I know I probably won't agree on a lot of the issues. But I'll be in conversation about it, and I hope through relationship, we may never agree on some of these issues, but I can stop seeing people as a position they hold and see them instead as a person who holds a position. Do you see the difference? So I hope when we talk about these objections that are often offered by skeptics, that we are in communication with people who love us enough and know us enough as people, and we've been the kind of Christ followers we're supposed to be, so that we actually still have a voice with those who don't agree with us. That being said, today what I want to do is spend some time talking about the hiddenness of God. And I want to give you an analogy, and then kind of follow up on that analogy with 3 or 4 points that I think are important, that connect the dots, I hope, on why a loving God who's all-powerful would at times intentionally hide from us. We'll start all of that after the break.
Be sure to visit the Cold Case Christianity website daily to read Jim's blog, watch the weekly video, or listen to the Cold Case Christianity podcast. You'll also find great free resources, including the free downloadable monthly Bible insert. While you're there, be sure to sign up for Jim's daily case note email. Cold Case Christianity is designed to help you become a better Christian casemaker.
Okay, let me start off with just a little analogy that hopefully will make some sense of why God is so hidden. And I'm going to use it in a way that is, I remember when I first wrote about this online, my wife Susie I always let her read my stuff, and she's my final critic, my final editor, and she says, you can't publish this. And so I made some serious changes in it, and then I still posted it. And she was happy with it finally when I did post it. But it seems to me that all of us, if you've been spending any time watching media or watching the culture, do you occasionally see what appears to be a mismatch in a relationship? In other words, you see this beautiful, young, vibrant girl in her 20s. And if you've ever seen a picture like this, where this beautiful, young, vibrant girl in her 20s is standing next to her husband, who is 50 or 60 years older than her. Could be her grandfather. Have you ever seen a picture like that in the media? Are you aware of that? Now, I can think of several. I'll bet you're tempted when you see that to use an expression which is kind of antiquated, but I think it still works. Have you ever heard the expression of a gold digger? Somebody who, and it's a Wikipedia, it's a Webster dictionary. This is actually an expression that we all know, probably have heard. And it really is a sense that somebody is in a relationship with somebody for something other than love or commitment. It's really about what material or positional or publicity, or what is it this older spouse can offer that suddenly makes the older spouse more attractive. Whereas you may never see someone who are this different in terms of station in life that happen to be paired because the younger is looking for something that the older can give. Aside from the long-term commitment, obviously, that's not going to happen. You're not going to be together very long if you're picking somebody who is in their 80s. We would say that when someone does that, there must be something else that's attracting. He has overwhelmed her with something other than his natural good looks. He's overwhelmed her with his ability to provide for her, either it's money or it's position or it's fame, whatever it may be. When that happens, we go, wow, that's really a bummer, isn't it? Because there's an opportunity lost to have the kind of robust relationship we'd love. If that was your daughter, you might understand why she would do such a thing, but I bet your heart aches a little bit in the sense that she'll never be in that lifelong committed relationship with somebody she could have been if she picked somebody her own age. How does it that this happens? Well, because the older partner is able to overwhelm the younger with something magnificent that the younger wants and is willing to sacrifice to get it. This idea of overwhelming somebody, if you saw these two on TV, if you saw these two on print media, you'd wonder, what is it about him that she knows that I don't know? She must have a different view of him that I'm looking at in the picture. Then you read in the bottom, he's a billionaire. Okay, I get it now. I see what it is she knows that I didn't know before. Well, let me ask you, don't you see there's a real danger? Don't you think that he wonders, the older man wonders, at some point if his young, beautiful bride is really interested in him as a person and loves him for who he is? Or if maybe she loves him because he's overwhelmed her with his wealth? I think that there must be a question in the back of every older gentleman who has overwhelmed a younger spouse with position, and you must wonder if I had walked into that room when I first met her and I had none of this and she knew nothing about my wealth, if she didn't know I was this rich millionaire, and if I just walked in and said, would she give me any attention at all? Would she care at all about me? Or did she know before I sat down who I was? As a matter of fact, I bet you he might think to himself, if I could do it all over again, I'd like to disguise my wealth and position and fame and just walk in and see if she would love me without my having to overwhelm her. Do you see where I'm going with this? It seems to me that if God was present the way that most of us would love for him to be, or most skeptics would demand that he be, he would overwhelm all of us. And we would be in love with the overwhelming awe and majesty and power of this being. And that's not what I think he's after. The kind of love I think God is after is the kind of love that presents itself much more modestly. And then there's no doubt. Look, I'm committed as a Christian. I'm committed to my belief. I'm committed to my trust in Christ. Even though there'll be days when I don't even feel his presence at all. And when you measure my commitment to Christ in those days, the bad days, that's what really tells you. How many times have you told your own kids, or you've experienced yourself, hey, it's easy to be married in the honeymoon period. Let's see how year 22 feels. Well, I'm in year 20 of my relationship with Jesus. And there are days when I wonder if I'm ever making any progress, if God is ever going to answer a certain prayer, and I still love him. Because that commitment has not been overwhelmed by the presence of God every day right in front of me. I instead have demonstrated, I hope, my commitment to Christ, even on days when I didn't feel it. Even on days when I had to kind of think my way through it. I want my kids, as they are now getting old enough to get married, to be involved in a relationship in which they have all that passion and love and energy for their spouse, but also love them and are committed enough to them, deeply enough, that on the bad days, they are still in love with their spouse. Because they're committed to something bigger that won't always be like it was in the honeymoon. I think that this idea that God is not going to overwhelm us has some merit. Let's take a break, and when I come back from the other side of the break, I want to give you a number of attributes of love that I think that a loving God would want to maintain if in fact He is loving. And it might help us explain, again, the hiddenness of God.
Need a speaker for your next conference, retreat, training seminar, or church service? Jim travels around the country, making the case for the existence of God, the deity of Jesus, and the reliability of the Bible. He'd love to partner with you to create a powerful, transformational training experience. Just visit the Cold Case Christianity website and click the Book Me tab. You'll find everything you need to know there, including a list of Jim's speaking topics, promotional materials, Jim's speaking calendar, and a link to connect with our team so we can book your event. Be sure to download the free Cold Case Christianity app from the iTunes Store and the Android Marketplace. The Cold Case Christianity app puts all the resources from coldcasechristianity.com in the palm of your hand. You can read the daily blog, listen to podcasts, and watch videos from within the application. And Jim uses the app to send direct messages to fans of Cold Case Christianity. The app will also link you to all Cold Case Christianity social media and provide you with a direct connection to J. Warner Wallace. Download the app today and become a better Christian casemaker.
Okay, I want to talk about 4 attributes of love. 4 attributes we typically would see in somebody we would call loving. The kind of person we would identify as loving would display these attributes. And if that's the case, and there is a loving God, we would expect Him to display these 4 attributes as well. And I think these attributes then kind of help us to explain the hiddenness of God. Let me give you an example. Here are the 4 things that I think are necessary in order for us to express or be loving. The first is that love requires a certain amount of freedom. We talk about this all the time in the problem of evil, right? That dangerous, scary thing we call freedom, which allows people to do the wrong thing on occasion, is actually necessary if you ever want to display genuine love for anything. Because love can't be coerced. If I am holding a gun to your head and I say, "Do you love me?" and you know I'm going to shoot you if you don't say yes, you might say, "Yes, I love you," but nobody would take that expression from you, "Yes, I love you," in that setting with a gun to your head and actually view it as genuine. They would say, "Oh yeah, well he must really..." No, they would say he was forced to say that. And that makes sense. Now, that kind of freedom is a part of the problem, isn't it? Because as a parent, I want my kids to show their love for me by at least doing what I told them to do. And if they do what I told them to do because I'm standing right next to them, do they really get... I don't give them any credit for that because I'm standing right there. You better do what I told you to do when I'm standing right next to you. The real test will be when you're with your friends and I'm not around and you don't see me anywhere and you know you could do this and get away with it because I'm not here. If you choose then to do what I've told you to do, you must really genuinely love and respect at least my advice to you or me in general. Your willingness to freely do what it is you know is right to do, even though I'm not there, is a genuine expression of your love for me. I'm sure that God feels the same way about this. If God was ever present and you knew that your moral rebellion would result in something because God's standing right next to you, how many times have you heard this expression? Would you be doing that thing you're doing right now if Jesus was sitting next to you? Christian, would you be doing that? If you knew that if you had Jesus over to dinner, how many times have you heard a pastor say that? Or somebody preach it? If you had Jesus over to your house, would He be happy with what's sitting on your coffee table? Would He be happy with how you speak to your children? The ever-present nature of God would really remove the freedom we have to genuinely show our love to God. Love requires a certain amount of freedom. So I think that the hiddenness of God is in some part explained by this attribute of love itself, the requirement for freedom. There's a second thing that I think has to exist in order for love to be genuine, and that is that love requires a faith, a trust that cannot be experienced if God is always, look, you know that when you want a kind of a confident, a powerful, a resilient, a transformational love, that is the kind of love that trusts. If you're married, you know this. You've got a spouse. They've said certain things to you. You trust that they're true. You don't go to work wondering if she out. I don't go to work every day wondering if my wife is cheating on me. I hope that you go to work wondering if your husband is cheating on you. We have a certain amount of trust in the other, and that requires a certain amount of faith, even though we can't see. And that is an expression of our love for one another, that I would trust you even though I can't see what you're doing. It may sound trivial, but it's not trivial. If I needed you there all the time to know that you're being faithful to me, that kind of lack of trust, is that real love? If God had to be present all the time in order for you to be confident He existed, would that really be an expression of love on your part if you said, I love God? Don't you think the hiddenness of God gives you the kind of freedom you need to express love genuinely, and also requires the kind of trust and faith we see in every love relationship? There's a third thing. Even though I think the hiddenness of God is important, I don't think He should be so hidden that we have no idea, we would never even think of God because He's so hidden. That makes no sense at all. There must be some degree of evidence that tells us, look, I may forget that I'm married, but I have this ring on my finger. It's evidence of the fact I'm in a relationship. It's not only evidence for me, it's evidence for anyone who comes around me. I'm a married man. This tells everybody I'm a married man. There's evidence of my relationship with my wife, even though you don't know if my wife's passed away. I know. I can look at this piece of evidence to remind myself that I'm married to Susie. There is evidence. I can go get the pictures of my wedding, my children. I got these pictures on the wall behind me. Half of them Susie are in. She's in half of them. So there has to be a certain level of evidence that supports your trust. Look, I've got good evidence that Susie won't cheat on me based on the kinds of everyday experiences we have together. So even though she's not here today, I don't doubt her affection or love for me because I've got plenty of evidence in my 37 years with her that help me to recognize that, in fact, I can trust and I have faith in who she is. Well, it turns out God has also given us that level of evidence. Not so much that it's overwhelming and ever-present that it would remove our freedom or destroy the role of faith or trust that you have to have in a loving relationship, but enough evidence to know that the relationship ought to exist, that He exists, and that our relationship with God is real. There's more than enough evidence. All I write about, all I tweet about, all I talk about is the evidence for God's existence. It's more than enough for those who want to love God to know that He exists. It's not so much that it overwhelms everybody, though, and removes their freedom and produces what would not be a loving world. It would not genuinely be love of God. It's not coercive, but it's sufficient. There's a fourth thing. Love requires a response. Not our response. Not just a response of one person toward one never responds, but a response in both directions. We have to have a response in both directions. Now you might be saying to yourself, well, wait a minute, so does God, sometimes if God's hidden, there's no response on God's part. Really? If I never go to the mailbox and I never open it, I will never know that my family has written to me. I have to go to the mailbox to look for the letter. I can choose to ignore every message. I could just say no on every time the phone rings. I could ignore all the attempts that my family makes to connect with me and pretend like they're just accidents. So that phone rings all the time accidentally. It's probably just a malfunction of my cell service. And the mailman always brings me junk mail. I'm sure there's nothing good in there. I can find a reason not to look for the communication that my relatives who love me will send me. You can do the same thing with God. He's written a book in which He communicates to those He loves. Now you can choose to ignore it. There are many times in your life when God has worked in your life. You can choose to ignore those. Or you can be sensitive to those. Now I'm not saying you should see things where they aren't. But I'll tell you this. Every loving relationship involves a response at the end of the day. I may not see my wife all day long, but when she comes home tonight, we will have a response, and we will respond to each other at the end of the day. And it turns out that the day you have as a living creature, if Christianity is true, is a lot longer than the 12 hours that are usually in a single day. It is eternity. At the end of your day, your temporal life, God will be there to respond to us at the end of the day. We know that's true as a matter of faith. I know that I will be hugging Susie when she walks in the door as a matter of faith, that she'll actually walk through that door at the end of the day. And that's based on the evidence I have. Not that she's overwhelmed me with it, but I know there's enough there. And if God exists and loves us, it seems to me He would allow us the freedom we need to love Him back genuinely, the opportunity to love and trust in faith. He would give us enough evidence to know that it was not misplaced. And finally, He would promise us a response. And if you think about it, most of the time when God responds to you in your life, you've probably found a way to minimize it, to ignore it, to attribute it to natural causes, to remove any possibility that that thing happened as just a coincidence. It wasn't divine providence. How many times do we do that? Do we attribute everything? You know, if our good friend Nabil Qureshi is suffering with stomach cancer, we've been praying for him, and I suggest we all continue to pray for Nabil. If you're watching this show, I hope you're aware of Nabil Qureshi, and I hope you are praying for Nabil. Now, if he does get healed, if he does survive his stage 4 stomach cancer, some people out there are going to say, well, did he take chemotherapy and all the radiation that, yeah, and he was treated by doctors, of course. Well, then that's why he was, really? How many times do you know somebody who's been suffering with cancer or some terminal disease, who we've prayed on, and they eventually are healed, and then you're inclined in the back of your mind at least to say, well, you know, it's probably because of the doctors. See, what I'm saying here is that we can ignore the response of God as though it's not God responding if we choose to. We shouldn't choose to. Those are the 4 things. Love requires freedom. Love requires the kind of faith we're talking about, the evidence of our love for one another, and finally the response that we will get from God at the end of the day, given our Christian worldview. So I hope that helps you think through why God might at times seem hidden, even though He's not. I'll join you back here next time at Cold Case Christianity.
Thanks for joining us at the Cold Case Christianity broadcast. If you're interested in more information about this week's topic, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. For a thorough investigation of the reliability of the New Testament Gospels in the case for Christianity, be sure to purchase Cold Case Christianity. A homicide detective investigates the claims of the Gospels. It's available wherever books are sold.